So tonight I'm pretty excited. I guess I'll say who I am. I'm Andrew. This is Bobby.
I'm Bobby in tech support.
Yep. And it's our pleasure to be here tonight with Paula Ross, who is going to wave so people can see who you are. And then, and then Carol Raschko. And we are going to go ahead and get started here. I just flipped a coin and I'm gonna go ahead and start with Paula. And we'll spend roughly half an hour with our questions, and then we'll pivot over to Carol's story, and then feel free to jump in if you have comments as we go. So first off, Paula, where is home for you? Where do you live?
I am in Southwest Idaho, just outside of Boise in a little place called Nampa,
Oh,
and lived here for almost 20 years, raised our kids here.
fantastic. I
Yeah.
almost drowned in the Nampa River there.
Oh my goodness.
Well, people like to go down, they like to raft it, you know.
Uh-huh.
And
Yep.
it's beautiful, beautiful there.
It is beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's usually an
Yeah.
accident on the river every year.
it's better if you stay in your raft for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I have a little bit of experience with those rivers up there also.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, they're beautiful.
so Paula, how long have you been long arming, and how did you start this journey?
So I've been long arming for about 6 or 7 years. I can't exactly remember. My mom is the one that bought one first, because we wanted to make bigger quilts than we could manage on a domestic machine. And so her and my dad invested in one, and I fell in love with it. And so I've been doing, long arming on various machines for about that long. And then I've had my Gammill for 3 years.
So when she got the machine, and of course you must have lived nearby enough that you could come
Mhm.
over and play. Is that right?
Yep. They live just up the street about 5 minutes. So I was over there a lot. And once I got to the point where I wanted to do my own business, I knew I couldn't do that at somebody else's house. So a Gammill came to live at my house.
Right. So you got your machine specifically for the purpose of running a quilting business?
Yes.
Okay.
And to be able to do my own quilts. But yeah, knowing that I could open it. I mean, I opened, got a business name and licensed and all that right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you come about to getting the Gammill, and what led to that?
Well, just because there's obviously other brands. So
Right. There is a dealer of another brand out here, that I have a little bit of affiliated with at her shop. And so I was looking at that, and my mom said, well, look and see what else is out there. So I did a little bit of Googling, and I found Doug and Heather out in Emmett when they were still over here in Emmett. And
Mhm.
they happened to have several gently used machines available. And I went to test drive right at the beginning of the pandemic, and there was no question after that. I knew that Gammill had the reputation that they did. We have a family friend that's run a Gammill for 20 years. When I think I did a little bit of Googling, and Gammill seems to be one of the very first that came out with long arms that people could have in their home. And so I knew they had the reputation and the reliability. I love the frame. It's a nice, big, robust frame. And so I knew I couldn't turn it down, even though I did have the option for a good deal on this other brand, but comparing that to a Gammill is kind of tough.
So which model of machine did you start with? Was it a computerized machine from the beginning?
No, I don't have a computer. I'm a hand guided. I have an 18-inch.
Okay.
It was a classroom machine at Doug and Heather's, and it wasn't even a year old. And so since I'm short, the arm reach is just perfect for me. And so
You seem tall on the computer.
I've got my husband's chair raised up as high as it'll go.
So you may be one of the first ones we've had on the podcast that has only a hand guide. Is that right?
I can think of one other in particular, and I think a second one as well. So it is the number that we don't keep track, you know, when we're getting people signed up to be interviewed on the webinar, we often don't even ask, but it ends up being roughly proportional to what our sales is, which is about 90% of what we sell is the Statler machines, and then about 10% is hand guided or hand guided with an elevate. So it works out about proportional, strangely enough. Law of
Yeah, I
big
was
numbers.
thinking, I'd been listening to all the past episodes, and in my head I was thinking they need to have someone who's a hand guided. And then a couple days later, there's West Plains on my caller ID, and they were calling to send me an invitation to do it. Perfect.
Awesome. So your machine then is a Vision 2, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since you only got it recently, I'm guessing you still have the same one today and you haven't had to do any trading up or upgrading or anything yet on your machine?
Nope, I have not.
Okay. So, big question. How
Okay.
did you know there was enough long arm quilting business in your area to support another long arm quilter?
We have a very quilt heavy population here. We've got 4 quilt shops within about 15 or 20 minutes from my house, 2 right here in town and 2 just a little bit outside of it. And whenever I talk to people, they said, yes, there's a market for it. Yes, there are quilters for it. We have a
And
very large guild and another small, there's our Boise Guild, and then we have a chapter of the Modern Guild, and they just keep growing. So yeah, I was definitely encouraged by other people say there's quilters enough to go around for everybody.
so when you as you have started and continued on this, what has been your method of how have you grown your customer base, and tell us a little bit about that part of the journey.
The best thing I did was I was a vendor at our recent quilt show for the big Boise Guild. It happened through other things, and somebody just said, hey, would you want to do this? And I said, yes. And that's brought in the biggest influx. Before that, I had cards made and I'd hand them out. I do have a Facebook page and an Instagram, and that, creates a little bit of following, but by and large, the show has caused the biggest influx of customers.
Mm-hmm.
So was it the show just kind of generates word of mouth, would you say?
Yeah, I handed out a lot of cards. A lot of people were really excited that I'm in the city that I am in, because there's a lot of people here. They don't want to drive to Boise. So the fact that I was here surprised a lot of people. They were very excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that was a really great opportunity that I kind of happened into on accident, because I wasn't looking for that. It kind of came through a few other channels.
So at a little show like that, it's almost like a networking opportunity because you're there for what, 2 or 3 days,
It was 2
and
days. Yeah.
yeah, 2 days, and a
Very
whole
much like a
bunch of
networking
quilters
event.
come through there. They're
Yep,
everybody's making tops, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it might have cost you for that booth? Was it just a couple $100s?
Yeah, I think it was 250.
Mm-hmm.
And that might have been with, because I needed electrical. My son did a video, so I had a looping video playing that showed kind of a portfolio of what I could do.
Mm-hmm.
So that it was just little 10 by 10. I had some great quilts hanging up that really drew people in because they were very unique stuff that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't normally see. So that was a good
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to get people to stop in the booth.
Great. I wanted to dig into that a little bit more because we hear a lot of the same answers to that question, which is, well, word of mouth and, you know, quilt guilds and doing shop samples and stuff. But I couldn't recall somebody else having mentioned having a little booth at a quilt show. And I think it was good to get a little more information on that. I think that'll help people.
Yeah, it was a good opportunity.
So, how did you come up with the funds to buy your machine?
We did a home equity line. Looked at the finances. We've got a great bank that's been really good to us. And when I first told them what it was for, they kind of looked at me like, a what? So I had to do a little explaining. But luckily we know we've been in our home about 15 years, so we had some good equity in it, and that's how I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you currently have another job that you do also, or is this what you do?
This is mostly what I do. I have a small affiliation with a local shop. I do some of their quilts. So that's helped fill in the gaps as I'm growing my own clientele. But for the most part, as a stay-at-home mom, gives me the opportunity to do that here.
That's something that a lot of people find as a big perk of this particular job, is that it lets them be there when the kids come home from school, or it lets them be there at those different events that
Yeah.
will come up, and to actually spend a lot more time with their kids. So about how, if you had to guess how many hours a week you spend quilting every week, I know it's probably varies.
It does vary. Probably 20 to 30 on a busy week. And some weeks, if my college kids are home and we're doing other things, sometimes it's not quite as many. Pretty flexible, but then there's some weeks where I'm every day getting stuff done. And so the hours are a little higher.
Mhm.
And since you have the vision, you pretty much do custom quilting only.
I do some pantographs. I
Pentagraphs?
do a lot of custom because not a lot of other people around here do that. The shops in the area, 3 of the 4 only do edge to edge. And so the other shop is the one I have a little bit of affiliation with. And so I've been kind of building the custom clientele there because they come in and they request me because I've done one before. They saw their friends and they want theirs done like that one. I love to do the custom work, and here there seems to be a nice market for it.
And at that shop that you're affiliated with, are you the custom quilting pretty much, or?
There's another one that does some custom as well, but I probably do the bulk of it because they're quite busy. So yeah, I do a lot of the custom, and it's my favorite. So
Mhm. So, how have you structured your rates? How do you what would you say is your per square inch rate, or is it quoted custom on each one? What's kind of an idea of what you're charging?
I do per square inch. Edge to edge starts at 2.5 cents a square inch, and then custom usually starts at 5 and goes up from there. We've got that local shop. They've got someone that teaches ice dyeing, and so there are a few customers that have the big ice dyed, and then that's a whole different price structure because that involves 100% design work as well, and that takes a lot of time. But they've been really fun.
Mhm.
So if you, what would you say the average price would be for a queen size quilt for you?
For a hand guided panto, probably a 150, and then a queen size for custom would probably start around 3,
Mhm.
depending on how big they want their queen. Sometimes people want queens that go to the floor, and so those take a little more.
And we don't have a whole lot of hand-guided quilters that we get to interview. So let me ask you another question that we wouldn't normally ask. But for a queen size panto that's going to be $150, how long would you say that quilt is going to be on your frame start to finish?
If I start in the morning, I can usually get done in the afternoon because I have a tendency to get a little obsessed and want to, one more row, or I only have 2 more rows left and I like to finish. If it's a really involved, complicated design, sometimes I'll leave it overnight and finish it the next day just to give my feet a rest.
Mhm.
The OCD kicks in.
Yes. I
And
want them
if
done.
and if you were custom quilting that, is it a 2-day job, more or less?
Um, Closer to a week with a custom, depending on how densely they want it done. I had an ice dye one on my frame for about 4 weeks
Mm.
because I had college kids down and back in between that I kind of had to let it sit for a few days, and then there was a lot of design work in it. But for the most part, I can get a custom one off in at least a week.
Mhm.
So as a hand guided quilter, about how many quilts would you say that you generally produce in a year?
I
And-
counted, because I know you asked that one. I think I'm close to 100 for this year, which seems
Hmm.
kind of low to compared to a lot of other people's
Not
numbers,
with
but
the
I know
amount
if
of
they're running,
customs that you're doing, though.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm close to that, and I do some donation quilts in there as well, and those are in the counts. Um, so about
There's a
that,
big difference between the, edge to edge and
yeah.
what you're doing. So yeah, that's not a bad number at all. What would you do? You know, like your number for the low count per year versus the most that you've done, or is it
I
pretty much
don't, because I
similar?
haven't really been keeping track of numbers except for the past maybe 2 years. I keep a little notebook and I keep track of the client, how big their quilt was, how they had it quilted, so that I can hopefully match those up with the pictures, because I always take pictures of every quilt I do. And I'm trying to organize kind of a digital portfolio to help, if I
Mm.
can see a client and kind of what their past work has been and what they like. So I'm trying to build that. So somebody gave me the suggestion of keeping track of every single quilt. And for a while, I was keeping track of stitch count, because people get a real kick out of hearing they have 500,000 stitches in a quilt.
Hmm. Good
But I
thing you
don't do
don't
that as
charge
much
per
anymore.
stitch, right?
That would be, if somebody asked me that, do you charge per stitch? I thought, not really.
Well, we have a question in. Deborah's wanting to know, did you have a large/long learning curve for doing custom quilting?
I guess it would depend on what they consider a large learning curve. I'm one of those people that has a tendency to jump in and learn everything I can very quickly, because I want to get up to those skills that I see other people do. And so I was really diving in a lot. I was at my mom's house a lot playing on her machine. And when I got mine, it took off even more because I had more time. I could go, stand at the machine at any time, and I didn't have to pack up and go to her house.
And that kind of dovetails into something that I usually try to ask people about: the importance of knowledge, education about how to do the quilting, because a lot of the people watching this are either starting a business or thinking about starting. How important would you say the learning of your craft is?
Very important. I tell beginners, watch as many quilters as you can, read as much as you can, take classes if you're a class person, and practice, practice, practice. You really have to immerse yourself in it. It's something I do every day. I watch somebody quilt every day. I watch either their YouTube shorts or watching their longer videos. I like to watch how other quilters build the design, how they get out of a tight spot. And that's really helped, because I feel like the hand muscle memory is one thing, but the brain muscle memory is another, and you need that as well. So I watch a lot of quilters do their quilting.
Hmm. What was the hardest part for you for growing your business?
Probably getting clients in the very beginning. It was very slow because I didn't know how to do that, how to promote myself, and so that started out fairly slow. I know a lot of quilters, most people, you don't usually hear them say I advertised, or I took out ads, or I did, print work, and most people say it's word of mouth. And so I had to put myself in places where I was around other quilters to start the word of mouth, and that helped. So
Hmm.
that was probably the toughest.
Hmm. Makes a lot of sense.
So, who would you say was your biggest cheerleader in this process?
Probably my husband, and then my mom. He's always very supportive. He's a very creative person as well. So the whole creative process and the concept of having my own business, doing what I love, he was always on board. And he even gave up part of our master bedroom, because that's where my long arm is.
I was gonna ask, did he merely support you all along the way, or did he even push you to do it? I'm just curious, because many times I find that ladies are they have a dream and they're kind of reluctant to take the step? I'm just curious.
I don't think I needed much pushing into buying one. He definitely was helping push me as I was getting prepared for the show and getting nervous, and he was supporting me and reminding me that yes, you can do this. And since he's a graphic designer, so he did my cards, he did my banner, he did some other things that really helped in that. So he was very supportive with that. So he definitely pushed me in that part of it, but I don't think I needed any help in making the decision to buy one.
You've already got the OCD working for you.
Yes.
And what sort of things has your mom, you said that she was supportive too. What sort of
Very
things did
much.
she say?
We joke, we were going into another quilt shop in town, and a friend of hers was coming out, and she had a little quilt in her arms, and my mom could tell that she was kind of not depressed, but she could tell that she was just, bothered about something. And she stopped her and asked her, what's going on? She said, well, I have this quilt and they can't get it done in time. And she said, well, my daughter does this. So she got me a quilting job in the parking lot of another quilting shop. So she'll tell anybody and everybody that this is what I do. And she's fabulous about spreading the word, because she has other quilting friends that I don't. And, a person from another person from another person ends up calling me and says, I got your name from, 3 different levels of people before it went back to my mom. So
I
she's
actually
definitely
might have
good PR.
I actually might have teared up just a little bit there because there's no better way to know that she's super proud of you and the work that you do, that she's grabbing you customers right and left.
Yes, she's amazing. She's the one that taught me how to sew. We started our quilting journey together when I was a teenager. So she's been right along with it. It's been really awesome.
Tell us about how the control of your own personal schedule, as well as the income that you've earned as you're doing this career, what kind of impact has that had on your life? You mentioned being able to be there for your kids more.
Yeah, when I first started, one kid was out of the house. And so I had, 3 left. I had my oldest, who was still doing college here, and then I had one in high school, right at the pandemic, and he had a lot of stuff ripped out from under him as his senior year. And so the fact that I could be here for that for him, and then help my youngest, who is in middle school, navigate finishing that year online, and I could be here for all of that. And as the kids have gotten older, stuff is chaotic in a different way than it was when they were younger. And the fact that I can control when I'm here and, taking somebody to college or picking somebody up from something else out of state, it's amazing. And I can be here when my husband is here, and we don't have schedules that clash so that we never see each other. We did that once very early on, and it was really difficult. So the fact that we can both be here and have total control over that is amazing.
That's very inspiring, that aspect that you just talked about. I wanted to ask you, what is something that you wish, looking back on your path with the long arm quilting, what is something that you wish that somebody would have told you when you first started out with this?
I thought about this question because I know you asked that. And I think I wish somebody would have told me to do it earlier. If, my mom bought one, and I think finances weren't where they could have been at that time, but I don't think we also knew that I could have financed it with the home equity. So I wish I had done it, 10 years ago. But yeah.
Well, I read somewhere that you had started out quilting as a teen. And I think there's a lot of younger people out there that, may be able to take as an example from you. Do you think, like, if somebody was a little bit younger, would you recommend them starting out earlier rather than later?
Yes. I think of all the quilts I could have done in years past, because I was so limited. It was really difficult to wrangle a quilt through my domestic machine, and it made the process less enjoyable, and I wanted to enjoy it more. And there were big quilts I wanted to make and quilt, and I couldn't do that. I didn't have the the domestic machine skills to do that. And so it would have been, I would definitely encourage it if they're thinking about it or looking at it. There's definitely a way to get a long arm into your life. And I would definitely encourage people to give it a try and see what they can do and see how they can get one in the door.
I appreciate what you're saying so much. I
Yeah.
see a lot of moms, and a lot of them don't get into the career field as early as they could have, and they go through a lot of struggles trying to balance their job and taking care of the kids in the house and all that stuff. And it's an impossible task anyway, from my point of view. But
Yeah.
but I look and see how a lot of times they struggle for 10 years or more as the kids are growing up before they finally find this career path.
Yeah. And for a long time, I've tried to mostly be a stay-at-home mom. That was important for my husband and I, that I was there to raise our kids. And so if I had it earlier, I sometimes wonder if it would have added too much chaos at the time when they were all, at home and in school. But it seemed to be working out at just the right timing for me to bring that in and start the business as they are all turning into adults and starting to craft their own lives. And they've all been very supportive. When I first told, my oldest two, when I was buying a machine, they're like, really? That is so cool. So they've all been supportive as well.
That's awesome. So if somebody's listening today and they want to do what you've done, you believe it's possible for anyone to do just like you did?
Absolutely. Yes. There is a way. There's not any one way to get a long arm into your house. There's a lot of creative ways to make it happen. And definitely, if they're thinking about it, talk to somebody that can help make it happen.
Well, cool. Don't go away. That's the end of
Okay.
the questions that I have for you, but don't just go away. We're
All
gonna
right.
transition here to Carol and ask her some of the same questions. And this is a kind of a treat for me, because I've been in Carol's studio a few times, including to deliver your first machine. So I didn't know you were going to be on the program until about an hour ago. And I thought, oh, well, that's cool. So some of these questions I know the answer to. So let me let Bobby take it from here.
All right, Carol. Well, why don't you start out by telling us where's home for you? Where you're located?
I'm in Selah, Washington. It's central Washington, just south of where Andrew came from, of Wenatchee, and farming and all kinds of agriculture.
It's like Palm Springs, basically, but without the.
It is the Palm Springs of Washington. They have a big sign that says that.
But without the palms and without the springs.
Yes.
You bunch of nuts.
And in fact, I was raised here. And when I got married, I moved away for 10 years and we came back in 2000.
Oh yeah. I've heard that story from so many people in a town. They move away and they come back, so.
Yep.
But yeah, that's where you're grounded at. So how long have you been in this world of long arming?
Not long enough. 10 years. I kind of back in 2000, I saw my first Gammill at a quilt show, and I knew that's what I wanted. And it took me 14 years to convince the husband, or 13.
So you saw the machine, you saw some long arm machines, and there was like 13 or 14 years until you actually
was able to get it. Yep. Raising kids and stuff. Day job.
That stuff like life and kids, that pesky stuff gets in the way, doesn't
it? A little bit.
So when you finally got your long arm, did you get it specifically to do a business, or was it just for personal?
Yes. In fact, my sister and we talked about it for years and years to get into business, a long arm and quilt shop business together. And so we finally She finally pulled the trigger in 2013 to open up her quilt store, the Quilters Cafe in Yakima. And she said, you need to get a long arm so that we are a one-stop shop. And I'm like, oh, okay. And fortunate enough, my husband was on board at that time. He took me down to San Diego in 2012-ish, and we went to a quilt quilt show. And there was a gal showing long arm there, Gammill, and showing it all, how it's computerized and going through all the money she was making. And we stood there probably for an hour, and he was just talking to her, and I'm like, see, I can make money, you know? So we kind of then decided to do that in 2013.
Mhm. So, you saw the Gammill machine there. Did you go through and consider a bunch of other brands and then finally decide on the Gammill? And if so, what was it that kind of tipped your balance towards getting the Gammill machine?
Well, going to quilt shows and stuff, you look at these other machines, and they didn't do anything for me. They just seemed not industrial enough, and like they wouldn't maybe hold up as well. And so finding the computerized one with Gammill, and knowing, I think wasn't it the first one to have the Statler on it,
Mhm.
to be computerized. I'm like, well, they've already been there, done that. Why reinvent it?
So, when you started, do you still have the same one that you started with, or have you upgraded, or?
I do have the same one, Pearl. I named her Pearl, and I upgraded to the Ascend, which I believe, Andrew, you put that on.
I was there to do that. Yep.
And that was in just a couple years ago, or a year and a half ago, to the Ascend. And then I bought my second one in 2019. And it was used from a gal down in Oregon. So, and it's also a Statler, but it's only a 12-foot table. So that way I have a little bit more room in my studio.
So why did you decide to add the second machine? Is it because you were spending too much time working?
The husband complained about not seeing me enough, and because I would
That's
work.
nice. That's
That's a good complaint. Yeah.
Well, I would work, my 40 hours a week or 8 hours a day. And then I'd come home at night and make dinner and go out to my studio for a few hours. And I'd be out there on the weekends or on vacation days or holidays. And I just told him, I finally convinced him. I was like, I think we need to get a second machine, because this is going to be my next career. And I will be a lot more efficient. And my big sales thing was, I'll have more time to spend with you. So
That was the big sales point.
yes.
So are you now exclusively doing quilting? Are you not working elsewhere now?
Nope. I retired from my day job in 2020. And so for the last 3 years, I've been doing just this. And it's been great. I don't have to, I just throw on clothes and go out into my studio and work when I want to.
So when you first started, how did you know there was enough long arm business in your area, or did you?
I don't know if I really knew or not. I knew of several long armors in the area that were getting elderly and probably going to be retiring. But it was mostly, my sister and I wanting to do this, adventure together, not realizing, this is a lot of work. And,
Yeah,
and
you were telling us at the beginning that both you and your sister have a shop.
well, yeah, she has the shop and I'm her long armor.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, people come in, do you do long arming? She's like, well, I have a armist. It's my sister Carol. Here's her card. And she has a whole spiel that she does. She's over there laughing now.
So obviously she is your main your main source of quilts coming through the door. Do you have any other methods of finding quilts, or is that one?
Right now, and in the beginning, that was it. But right now, I do advertise. I have an advertising in the local guild website. And then my mom also in the beginning, she's involved with several quilt guilds and would say that I do long arming. But mostly it's pretty much, I'm going to say 98% was my sister.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now actually there's a lot of word of mouth because people went to so-and-so, they closed down their shop. And then this gal at my quilt guild, you did one of hers. So I brought mine up to you. So.
Mm-hmm.
You go ahead.
All right. Well, this is a question that I might have known the answer to 10 years ago because you did buy your first machine from me. But how did you come up with the money for it?
Yeah, I might have told you. Funny story, because I actually bought a new car in 2013. And I think I reached out to you and Michelle to get a quote on a new Gammill in 2013. And I looked into the financing of it, and it was quite a high interest rate. And we're like, oh, well, sadly, my husband's aunt passed. But we got a little bit of money there that was able to, our inheritance,
Mm-hmm.
and that paid for the machine, and I financed the car.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that story before?
I was not sure how the car worked into it, but basically, if you hadn't have got the Gammill, you probably would have used your aunt's money for the car. But instead, right, okay, yep. How do you think she would have thought? I mean, of course, she's gone now, and do you think she would approve of how you use the money and what you've done?
I think so. Yeah. She wasn't a crafty person. She was my husband's aunt.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, she would have been fine with it.
Mhm. You could have used it on a trip; it'd be gone.
Yeah.
Right?
So, how many hours a week do you put into quilting?
So I'm just going to guesstimate. I do 20 to 40 hours a week. It just depends. Sometimes I'm out there like 3 or 4 days in a row, and I just get a little bit like I need to get out, little, I think, stir crazy because my husband's working. I'm the only one at home, and I need to go out and like talk to people. At least these last 3 years it has been. But I also then will take that time. I come to my sister's shop to meet clients. So I have a station here that I pick up and I meet clients. I pick up their quilts and deliver their quilts from here. So I make appointments and get out that way.
And how do you what's your feeling in general about your work schedule? Is it something you're happy with?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's great. I mean, if I want to go and not go out to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, which I typically start at 11, but I'll work until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Paula's
So.
smiling. I bet she goes earlier than that.
Nope, I'm definitely a night owl.
Well, and for how many years? Over 30 years, I had to wake up at 6 o'clock, 6:30, and go to an 8 o'clock work or even earlier. And I was like, I don't want to have to do that.
Mhm.
So I'll work in the evenings, and I listen to the news and stupid shows. So I don't really watch TV. I just listen to it.
Mhm. So, are you mostly then just doing edge to edge, or do you do some custom in there?
Mostly edge to edge. I do some custom, and some people, I'm surprised that some people don't realize what custom is. Some of my clients, what is that? But I have a lot of digital patterns, and some of them I do have for specific quilts. So if I see one, I'm like, oh, that needs to be custom. I don't think that should be edge to edge. So, but other times I will talk them into an edge to edge when how much are you wanting to spend? how long do you want it to take? It'll take longer, that sort of thing.
And there are obviously some quilts that, because of the fabrics involved in the quilt, you could spend a lot of time custom quilting it and it would never be seen. You know,
Right.
it would
That,
kind of
yes.
disappear into the quilt.
Yes.
So, yeah, you hate to have part of your life disappear on that quilt and it won't
Yeah.
matter. Yeah.
Right.
So, do you what do you charge as far as your per square inch rate? Do you charge a minimum or loading fee or per bobbin charges or?
Yeah, I do have a minimum charge. Right now it's $40 minimum, and but it'll change next year. I charged a penny and a half a square inch. This year I've increased that because it's been my busiest year. So I have some patterns that are that much because they're just a fast sew, and they don't take that long at all. The ones that I haven't marked are 1.8 cents per square inch, and then I have some that are a lot more dense. Might take 2, 3 bobbins to quilt the row, depending on the size of the quilt, but a bigger quilt. And those I'll charge 2 or more cents per square inch.
Mhm.
And custom, I think I started it depends on the custom, but in general, 5 cents a square inch.
Mhm. Mhm.
How much would you say an average queen size quilt is?
For an edge to edge, probably around $150 to $200, depending on the pattern is picked.
Have you kept track of the financing enough or the finances enough to be able to give us an idea what you've earned in your best year and what your worst year was like?
Yeah, my worst year was definitely my first year. It took me a long time to get going. Um, so I think I quilted less than 30 quilts for clients. I was
Mhm.
a little nervous starting. Um, and then the next year I was excited because I doubled it. I was like, wow, I did 50. And definitely 2022 was my best year. Let's see here. I made, I think I quilted in 2022 321 quilts.
Mhm.
And so this year I'm on record to do way more than that. As of the end of or middle of September this year, I've done 307 quilts compared to 204 last year
You're
at the
busy.
same time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was surprisingly busy all summer long. People were surprised. I'm like, I'd pick up 8 to 15 quilts a week, and I'd deliver 8 to 12 a week. And I was really surprised at how
Do you know
busy
what?
I was.
Do you know what you attribute the increase in volume to?
I think a big part of it is because there have been several long armors that have retired or closed up shop here and moved away. I
Mhm.
think there's probably about at least 5 in the last few years, maybe up to 7 that have either retired or moved away.
This is one thing that maybe sometimes people don't understand when they are getting into the business. Um, I'm more familiar with it just because I I've been involved in it for a long time and I've also bought back people's machines when they were retiring. It is kind of a career that has a time span. I mean, I guess it's like if you go into the military, you might do 20 years, or if you go and be a teacher, you might do 30 years, and that's your full retirement. But for long arm quilting, it seems as though a lot of times people will get into it when they're in their 40s or 50s, and they'll
Hmm.
go and they'll build a business that's strong and thriving and all that stuff. And then there comes a point where they're 20 years down the road and they start going to where they're just cherry picking just their favorite customers to do
Hmm.
work for because their earning needs aren't what they used to be. So
Right. Right.
yep, yep. So there does tend to be a little bit of a revolving door, so to speak. There's new ladies coming in at the young end, and then there's the older ones that are kind of retiring out at the top end. So
Mm-hmm.
do you provide or sell supplies like wide back fabrics? What do you have for battings that are available for people?
I do have a couple of wide backs available. However, mostly what I provide is, and I sell it by the yard, is batting. And, and I have warm and natural, warm and white hobs, wool. I did carry a bamboo, but nobody really wanted that. So I'm going to use that for my own quilts. I have 100% polyester. Um, and then I did a black for a while, but it never really sold. So I just stopped carrying that.
Mhm.
But my sister also has some dream batting that she has available. So we kind of covered a lot of different battings.
Mhm.
And then get the backing from her as well.
Mhm.
So, and I do provide binding service
Mhm.
as well.
Okay. Have you pieced any backings or t-shirt quilts for people or any of that?
Yeah, I have. And I just kind of throw a number out there. If it's a smaller quilt and I just fold the batting in half and put one seam in it, it's $5 or $7. But, and I have done several t-shirt quilts over the years.
Mhm.
And that I price that by shirt, depending on what kind of pattern they want.
We had somebody who asked us a question in the Q&A, which is whether you're doing both types of quilting on both machines, custom and edge to edge. I think kind of what's behind that question is sometimes people will kind of designate one of their machines as the one they do custom on.
I do both on both, but it just depends because um, I still work in CS6 on my older machine or on my shorter, smaller machine. And I've upgraded to CS7 on the other one. So now that it's easier to search for patterns on in the CS7, I do more of my quilt custom on my bigger machine, my older machine. So
Gotcha.
it just depends.
Bobby and I both had a little question mark pop up in our heads. We'll talk to you later about why in the world you don't have the same software on both, since the upgrades are free. But I don't want to go off topic here. We'll talk about it later. So
Yeah.
what was the hardest part of growing your business?
Um, I think probably in the beginning was just the learning curve. And I talked to you about this, Andrew, knowing computers and, working a desk job, how to do things. Um, and then I'm like, can't you copy and paste? Can't you drop, click and drag and drop? And so now in CS7, you can do that. But I'm like, why can't you copy and paste? Because, it would be so much easier. But,
Right.
and now we can. But, uh, what was the question
The
again?
hardest part of growing your business.
Okay. And then overall, probably time, just having the time to put into it.
I remember that you did not retire from your 9 to 5 for a really long time. You were doing both.
Yep. For 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. That's why I was working, that's why I got the two machines. Then I could be more efficient with working both.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, in 2020 was a good year that we both, actually, my husband retired as well. And so
That was a year
traveling.
of transition for many people.
Yes. Yes.
So, who's been your biggest cheerleader? Who's been behind you all the way?
Definitely my sister. Um, she's, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. She goes, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And I'm like, she goes, just, it'll quilt out. And I'm like, Randy or Linda, stop telling people that. But yeah, definitely my sister, Linda, biggest cheerleader. But my husband supports me. My kids do. My mom and dad. So that's great.
That's got to feel good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what kind of impact has the quilting money, the control of your personal schedule, what kind of impact has that had on your life?
I think the biggest impact would be my schedule, and if I want to not get up with an alarm clock and sleep in, I can do that. And
Do
I
what you
can
want
work.
when you want.
Yep. Probably a general answer for mostly everybody, but if I feel like I make deliveries. Usually, I try to schedule deliveries the day before or pickups the day before I go, and bring in a bunch of quilts to deliver and stuff. So, um, and then sometimes it's like, well, I've got to go do this. And the other thing that was a big impact was in 2020. Um, my sister and I started feeding our parents. My mom had an episode and stuff. So I just, felt like it was a sign I need to just do quilting, and I prepare meals for my family and my parents and deliver that. They live in this, 5 minutes away. So that's been really nice to not have to worry about a day job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is something that you wish someone would have told you when you first started?
I think I'm going to go with the answer that Paula said. Do it earlier. I was like, that's a great answer, because I mean, ultimately, I told you I wanted to do it for what,
Yeah, 10
12
years
years before,
before. Yeah.
but just didn't feel like, with having the kids at home, and the husband didn't realize you could make money. Um,
Think you could have done it earlier?
I think so. I do.
Because, you had to come up with the money.
Right. There was that.
Mm-hmm.
But what's that?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we can do whatever we set our mind to doing, right?
hmm
You
We
did
find a way.
wait 13 years to get that machine.
hmm Yeah. And before that, we did a lot of sewing. We had family sewing days and stuff, and reached out to our cousins in Portland and Seattle, and we'd get together, and it was really fun. And I did try to sew or quilt on my domestics, and it's just it wasn't fun at all. And like I said, when I saw that computerized Gammill, I'm like, well, that's it. That's what I need. I mean,
Mhm.
even if I can, record it and redo it, I'm like, well,
Mhm.
so
So do you believe that if somebody else wanted to do what you've done, that it's doable for anybody?
yes. It's not for everybody. I was a little worried in the beginning if I would get bored, because I have that tendency. I have a tendency to do more than one thing at once. But I'm like, I can do a quilt over here and a quilt over there. And I think anybody could, if they like doing sewing, that this would be really fun for them.
Mhm.
And I'm, keep in my back of my head, hoping that my daughter, my niece, or maybe my granddaughter would like to take it over from me, because I would definitely help them.
Have you had some helpers there in your studio from time to time? I mean, them?
No,
No?
no, sadly, no. But my
Mm,
granddaughter is only 2.5, so I'll give her a
well,
few years.
yeah, give her some time. We had another question asking do both ladies have more demand for larger than 10-foot frames, larger quilts? Okay, so I didn't ask the length of your tables.
Oh,
So our standard length is 12 feet. What length do you have?
I have a 14 and a 12.
Mm-hmm.
I have a
And Paula?
12.
You have a 12?
12. Mhm.
Yep. What are your
And
thoughts about table size? I mean, have you turned away a quilt
I've
because it
I'm
wouldn't
glad
fit?
I'm glad I have a 14.
Mhm.
Um, I I just there's somebody that I just talked to the other day. She goes, I have my quilt is 120 inches. I'm like, I can quilt it.
Well, you can do 126 inches on a 12-foot frame, but that doesn't give you a lot of margin. That's for
Right,
sure.
Right.
Yeah, I've pushed mine to its limits a couple of times. And I always take pictures for posterity to show people it can be done. I actually have I don't have the Home Pro table. I have the big, the big
Big
regular
GS.
table.
Yeah.
That was one of the deals that Heather and Doug were able to do for me, is I wanted the big heavy duty table. So even though I have the little machine, I still have the ability to do that great big one. And people always told me, buy the biggest machine you can fit in your house. Or buy the biggest table space that you can fit. And 12 has done everything that I've needed it to so far.
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of times I do run into a lot of people who they get a 10-foot table because they just can't fit anything else into their house. But and I think what you guys are saying kind of bears witness to my feelings that if you possibly can, it's really worth it to at least have the 12-foot table. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Very much.
Yes. Definitely. And the biggest, longest throat space. Because there's just so many designs that are now nesting designs, and because and you just don't have to roll as much. And if you end up having a design that's 15 inches and then you roll it, and then your throat space is only 10 inches, it's hard. You're limited on your quilting designs that you can use with a smaller throat space.
I would also say on the throat space angle, particularly with computer, although it can be an issue with hand guided quilting as well, is that you can find yourself forced to have to quilt the quilt more densely than you would prefer if your
Yes.
throat space is smaller. And
Yep.
the reason for that is that you're working it out so that the pattern has a certain height and a certain width,
Yep.
and you have to do X number of them across to get from one side to the other. And if your throat depth is not so much, if it's a smaller machine, you can find yourself wanting to space the pattern out a little bit more so that it's not as dense, but you
Mm-hmm.
can't.
Right.
And yeah, without turning all of your circles into eggs,
Right.
Right, right. So that's something that a lot of times people don't know when they'll buy a machine from a place that would sell snow to an Eskimo, and not really
Yeah.
from somebody who is going to really give them good straight advice. And then they find out that, yeah, this is the machine I could afford, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
even working for me. So
Yeah. And with all the computer now, and there are so many designers that are doing digitizing quilt patterns. And I can tell from 10 years ago to now how they're being a lot more efficient with how they design it and don't backtrack as much. But they're just getting fancier and fancier with all the designs.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah, the Statler's you got to go with that, right?
Well, we do have about 90% of people that have the Statler machines, and about 10% is hand guided. And um, obviously, with a Statler, you can still hand guide it.
Yes.
But many times people they will choose to learn how to hand guide with their Statler, but many other times they have such quick and easy success with the Statler that they never put in the effort to learn how to do hand guided quilting. What I like to say is it's a little bit like the difference between buying a piano and having it delivered to the house and learning how to use it versus buying a jukebox and having it delivered to the house and learning how to use it. Because with the jukebox, you just punch a couple buttons on the front of it and the music is already made. It's going to be beautiful and perfect every time. With the piano, though, there's probably going to be quite a bit of lessons required and bad music before you start getting the good music.
Yep.
And so either one will give you music in your house. It's just that the path is different.
Yeah. I do a little bit of hand guided. It just depends on, the quilt. I mean, I did a denim quilt that they had really super thick corners, and I'm like, I can't sew over those. So I did a really simple hand guided, and I've quilted it with the belts on a lot. You get straighter lines,
Mhm.
but
And I would just point out that with both the hand guided and computerized, there's a learning curve, and there's a lot to be learned on both of them.
mhm.
For the people that are watching, if you go to Gammill.com, you can access a lot of the new owner training courses that we have available, and there's even a educator consult. You can buy an hour of time with a lot of our educators, which for a lot of people that's a really really good blessing there.
Mhm.
Yes, you have a lot of wonderful videos. I tell people look on Gammill.com, and if they have like a different long arm, I'm like, just look on Gammill because they have all these ideas, not just because. So
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight and telling your stories. I really do hope that that those who are listening, both tonight as well as in the future, can maybe see themselves a little bit in your story and maybe find the courage to take that leap of faith, because it is scary to make a change. We're always apprehensive when we go to make a change. But if you know that you're pursuing something that's worthwhile and that it's going to be a positive change for your life, we can gather together our courage and make it happen. So
mhm.
thank you so much for sharing your stories and inspiring other people. Do you have any last words you want to throw in, anybody, before we wrap it up?
Oh, I don't think so.
No.
Well, I just want to say the two Paula Ross, Carol Raschko have been very inspirational, and we so much appreciate you joining us. And I know the people watching tonight have been enriched by you being here. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank
Thank you
you.
too.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice night.
You too. Bye bye.